The ballroom buzzed with laughter and music, but Emma stood nervously behind the photography booth, clutching the camera like it was her lifeline. This wasn't supposed to be her job tonight. Her cousin, the real photographer, had fallen ill at the last minute. Emma, who had only dabbled in photography as a hobby, was begged to step in. She hesitated, terrified of ruining someone's precious memories, yet her heart wouldn't allow her to say no. Weddings were moments people carried forever, and she couldn't bear the thought of disappointing the bride, who happened to be her childhood friend. So, she stood there, hidden among flowers and fairy lights, her hands trembling as guests posed in front of her lens. Every click of the shutter was a prayer that she wouldn't mess this up. But as she observed the joy, the tears, and the stolen glances between loved ones, something shifted inside her. She realized that maybe tonight wasn't about being perfect. It was about capturing love in its truest form. Just when Emma began to find her rhythm, a tall man with tired eyes and a guarded smile walked into the booth. He was holding the hand of a little girl in a pink dress who looked up at him like he was her entire world. Emma didn't know it yet, but this moment, this snapshot of a single dad and his daughter, would change her life in ways she never imagined. Fate had quietly stepped onto the stage, and Emma was about to become part of a story far bigger than herself. The man introduced himself politely, his voice calm but carrying a weight Emma couldn't quite place. His daughter, Sophie, bounced excitedly, tugging at his hand as if eager to capture the moment. Emma crouched down to Sophie's level, adjusting her little flower crown and whispering, "You look like a princess tonight." The child beamed, and for the first time, Emma saw the man's guarded expression soften. Through the lens, Emma watched the bond between father and daughter unfold. Sophie giggled when he lifted her into his arms, and though his smile was faint, it was filled with a depth that spoke of sacrifice, resilience, and love that ran deeper than words. Emma clicked the shutter, capturing not just an image, but a story etched in their eyes. After the photos, Sophie skipped off to join other children, leaving Emma and the man momentarily alone. "Thank you," he said quietly, his gaze lingering on Emma as though she had done something extraordinary, though all she had done was take a picture. She brushed it off, replying softly, "You don't need to thank me. She's a beautiful girl. Anyone could see how much she means to you." A flicker of pain crossed his features, and Emma realized there was more behind his silence than he let on. But before she could ask, he excused himself and disappeared into the crowd. Emma stood there, strangely unsettled. She didn't even know his name, but something about him stayed with her. Like a melody unfinished, waiting to be heard again. Little did she know, their paths were destined to intertwine before the night ended. The evening rolled on, and Emma grew more confident behind the camera. She laughed with guests, caught candid smiles, and even managed to steady her trembling hands. Yet, her eyes kept scanning the room, searching for the man and his daughter. Something about them had left a quiet mark on her heart. Near the dessert table, she finally spotted Sophie, now clutching a cupcake with frosting smeared across her tiny cheeks. Emma smiled, raising her camera to capture the sweetness of the moment, when suddenly she noticed Sophie struggling to reach a napkin. Before Emma could step forward, the man appeared, gently wiping his daughter's face with a tenderness that was almost heartbreaking. Emma lowered the camera, her chest tightening with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Later, as the reception slowed and music softened, fate intervened again. The man wandered back to the photography booth, this time without Sophie, who had fallen asleep in the care of a relative. "You're better at this than you think," he said, nodding toward the camera in Emma's hands. She laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Trust me, I'm not. I'm just filling in tonight." He studied her, his eyes steady, almost searching. "Sometimes the best things happen when we're not prepared," he murmured. His words caught her off guard, striking a chord she didn't expect. Emma felt a warmth spread through her, an odd mixture of being seen and understood. Before she could respond, he offered his hand. "I'm Daniel," he said simply. And just like that, the mystery began to unfold. Emma shook his hand, feeling an unexpected spark, though she quickly dismissed it as her imagination. "Emma," she replied softly. Daniel repeated her name as though committing it to memory, then leaned against the booth's counter, surprisingly at ease. They began talking, at first about the wedding, the food, the decorations, but soon their conversation wandered into deeper waters. Daniel shared that he was a single father, raising Sophie alone after losing his wife 3 years earlier. The weight in his voice made Emma's chest tighten. She saw not just a polished, confident man but a father who carried grief quietly while giving his daughter every ounce of love he could. Emma listened intently, her heart swelling with respect. She didn't pity him, she admired him. And in turn, Daniel found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years. He was a CEO, he revealed almost reluctantly, though Emma noticed he said it as if the title meant nothing compared to being Sophie's dad. Emma confessed her love for photography, admitting she'd always been too afraid to pursue it seriously. "Fear keeps us smaller than we're meant to be," Daniel said gently, his words carrying the weight of lived experience. For the first time, Emma felt seen, not just as the stand-in photographer but as someone with dreams worth chasing. Their exchange was interrupted when Sophie stirred awake, calling softly for her father. Daniel excused himself, lifting his daughter with the same tenderness Emma had admired all night. But before walking away, he looked back at Emma, his gaze lingering long enough to leave her breathless. Something unspoken had passed between them, something that felt like the beginning of fate's design. The night drew closer to its end, and Emma began packing up the photography booth, her heart still replaying fragments of her conversation with Daniel. She told herself it was silly, she barely knew him. Yet there was something about the way he spoke, the way he carried himself, that felt different. Just as she zipped up her camera bag, Daniel reappeared, Sophie now fast asleep on his shoulder. He hesitated, then walked closer. "I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye," he said quietly. Emma smiled, touched by the simple courtesy. "Goodbye, then," she whispered, though part of her wished it wasn't the end. Daniel studied her for a long moment before pulling a small business card from his pocket. "If you ever think about photography more seriously, call me. I know people who'd see your talent." Emma hesitated, stunned by the unexpected gesture. "Why would you do that for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. He gave a small smile, eyes softening. "Because sometimes strangers believe in us before we learn to believe in ourselves." Emma swallowed hard, unable to respond. She slipped the card into her bag, watching as Daniel walked away into the night with Sophie safe in his arms. It should have felt like a goodbye, final and fleeting, but deep down, Emma sensed it was something else. A thread had been woven between them, delicate yet undeniable. As she closed the booth, she realized she hadn't just replaced her cousin at a wedding. She had stepped into a moment of fate, one that might change the course of her life forever. Days turned into weeks, and though Emma tried to return to her normal life, Daniel's words lingered in her mind like a gentle echo. One evening, after much hesitation, she pulled out his card and dialed the number. To her surprise, he answered instantly, as if he had been waiting. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, and soon, coffee meetings turned into dinners, laughter turned into trust, and friendship blossomed into something neither had planned but both desperately needed. Emma pursued photography with Daniel's encouragement, her fear slowly melting away as she began booking her first clients. Each time she captured a family's joy or a couple's love, she thought of that wedding night when she had been too scared to even lift the camera. And Daniel, once weighed down by grief, found himself healing in Emma's presence. Sophie adored her, calling her Auntie Em, and with every bedtime story and every shared giggle, Emma became part of their world. One evening, under a canopy of stars, Daniel finally confessed, "I thought fate had stopped giving me second chances, until the night I met you." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she realized how extraordinary life could be when kindness and courage opened the door. What began as an accident, replacing her cousin at a wedding, had turned into the very thing that gave her a purpose, a family, and a love she never expected. The lesson was clear: sometimes life changes not through grand plans, but through small acts of courage and compassion. And when fate decides to intervene, it always leads us exactly where we're meant to be.